The mystery of leopards. I glimpsed my first leopard when I was 12 years old.
And he wouldn't see another leopard again until the mother leopard. The story is the story that's been handed down, but the story is she stepped out in front of a vehicle and she just looked back. Up until then, leopards were fleeting. They were quick. You'd see a flash of spots and be done. She arrived at the back end of a big restoration land care project.
As the people on the land started to work with the land and think of the land as their partner, this most mystical of emissaries from the natural world started to allow herself to be seen. There's something about that has a profound power. Her presence was symbolic of here was a wild place that was healed, where a relationship was being built between people and the wild again.
For my dad, I think a part of him knew that if I can do this in other places, we can bring back beautiful species all over. It certainly was a catalyst that drove him forward.
We always say 1896, the time when the president of this province, Paul Kruger, muted the idea that land should be set aside for wildlife protection. What was happening, as happened on every continent, is the settlers were advancing at the detriment of the wildlife. The wildlife was being devastated. In 1926, the borders of the Kruger National Park were finalized.
The Kruger National Park is South Africa's splendid game preserve, in which wild animals can live in their natural surroundings, and such sites as these are common along the roadside.
The area that is Londolozi actually fell out of the protected area. So everything east of the Kruger fence, the wildlife would be afforded protection, and everything to the west of the Kruger fence would be left to the vagaries of agriculture and farming and whatever. They'd stock the land with cattle, but what they didn't know is what the effect of the cattle would have on the habitat. Wildlife on a semi-arid, low rainfall area is equipped. It's evolved over eons. And when the rain doesn't come, the wildlife adapts. Cattle has none of that ability. Cattle on semi-arid, low rainfall areas create desertification. A piece of land which no one would be interested in. And in 1926, seemingly after too many gin and tonics, my grandfather said, "That sounds like a good idea. I'd like to buy the land." And that's where Londolozi started its life. Charles Boydvati was my grandfather, and my grandfather was a great adventurer. His partner was Frank Unger, the two names at the top of that document. Frank Unger simply loved Africa for its space, and he helped my grandfather to purchase the land. This took place 1926. You can only imagine when the sound of the train had disappeared and you're down on your feet. That's it, you're on your own. And there's this beautiful wild wilderness all around you. And in the fading light of June of 1926, pitched a tent on the banks of the Sand River under a huge 400-year-old ebony tree. It was to become an annual pilgrimage for the Vati family every year in June and July. The war had a profound effect on my father. He was 31 Squadron and he flew Liberators, which is the plane behind him there, and those little white spots there are the bombing raids that he went on. And lived an extremely dangerous existence. They talk about post-traumatic stress from men who have gone to war. I've no doubt that he had it. If you can imagine losing 67 of your friends in one night, can you imagine what that must be like? And he used to say to me, boys become men through wartime flying or hunting lions. And it's the hunting lions part that he took his sons to go and do. That was the culture of the time, and he was of that generation. But there was a far deeper thing that came from hunting, was that you were required to be very disciplined, you were required to be respectful, you had uninterrupted time with your father. It gave us an unbelievable emotional connection to wild places, which live with us to this day. But along the consciousness continuum, we became conscious of the fact that killing a lion made no sense, and that dominating nature is not possible. You have to recognize that nature is a master plan of intelligence, and that we are simply a tiny, tiny part of that. And so that was kind of a passing message that he even had realized. And he certainly, in his later years, the hunting became less and less important.
My dad was 15 years old when his father passed away. And that was in 1969. And it was very sudden. Family advisors were telling them to sell the farm. It's bankrupt. It's a completely dead asset. Get rid of it. And in that meeting, the boys stood up and said, look, it's our last connection to Dad. We will make it work. My grandmother said to them, if you boys want to do this, I can support you, but financially, you're on your own.
The idea of selling the land, and you don't give much credence to the other problems, like cash flow and a few other things, was just a no for us. We told our mother, please don't sell the land. And then I take a deep breath and say, we will start a safari company. Starting a safari company in South Africa is unheard of. And these geniuses over here, 15 years old and 17 years old, don't worry, we'll start a safari company. Anything you could get wrong in the safari business, boy, oh boy, we did it.
I remember looking back at the original ledgers, and we had the princely sum of 53 Rand and 61 cents in the Barclays Bank in White River. So there was always a plan to be made. I mean, there was no doubting that we could do it.
Getting stuck in the river for 10 hours because we didn't have a recovery vehicle, no problem. Breaking down at night, no radio, walking home with your guests, that's part of the job. Sleeping in a treehouse, we used to have an old treehouse, that used to happen. I mean, all sorts of things. It was unstructured. And people had fun. They had a lot of fun.
What I take out of their stories is, in life, you have to have an amazing sense of humor. because I don't think they would have made it otherwise.
You had to be totally naive and foolish to believe that this was even possible, and then wild enough to try it. But there was something transcendent about what happened when this much spirit came together. And so it's just a story of defying the odds. Once they started living here regularly, questions started to emerge. Where were the plains that they had read about? Where were certain species of animals? Some of those questions came from historical accounts. Some of it came from their own experience.
My dad, he used to say, where have the sable gone? And where have the waterbuck gone? And he would tell me, when he was a kid, there were thousands of waterbuck.
As a result of the heavy grazing and the loss of soil moisture, the system was drying out. And if you walked around here, mostly what you would see is kind of eye-high scrub, so very few animals.
We used to do kilometers upon kilometers of game drives in search of animals. It's nothing worse than an hour or two on a Land Rover and you've seen nothing, seen one duiker in the thick bush. Now your guests aren't that happy. So now we start as young businessmen. Hey, how do we fix this? And we were under pressure. The creation of Kruger National Park in 1926 was a very, very visionary idea to set land aside for wildlife, and to this day stands as an absolute beacon for conservation in the world. Their mandate is to look after the nation's natural resources, and their management policy in 1960 was to fence Kruger. Animal movements geographically were from the eastern seaboard of Africa to the mountains where the high rainfall is. Like all migrations, animals used to follow wherever the food was, but without the knowledge of how things worked, they built the thing north-south. You completely fractured the natural movement of animals. And we had the ridiculous situation of fencing between wildlife and wildlife. As is the case to this day, humans believe you can make an intervention in isolation into a completely integrated design, which has been going for eons of time. So 3,000 wildebeest now were concentrated in Sabi Sand. And on top of the cattle damage that had been done when Londolozi was a cattle ranch, we created secondary damage, modified habitat. Wildebeest went down, zebra went down, sable were gone, all the grass feeders. We inherited the ills of what had happened in the past ecologically. We were seeking solutions. We were trained in business. It was just, what's the problem? How do we fix the problem? How do we stay alive?
The truth is that when John and Dave were youngsters, they were trying it all.
Our first ever move was to buy cheetah.
It seemed like in those early days we started and we put the cart before the horse, insofar as it was all about transporting different animals into the area.
And they ran away. We bought cheetah and released cheetah into Londolozi. They ran to Chokwan where it's more open. Of course they did, because they needed it open. And then we bought sable.
Then we went on to translocating waterbuck.
They were getting helicopters and moving live, fully grown elephants for the first time. They were trying all of it. I mean, the national parks referred to Dave and John as conservation mercenaries. They were on an absolute tear to move stuff, rhino, relocate stuff, bring stuff from one park to another, getting permits, changing. It was a scene.
As you go down the road, you realize that, first of all, nature is more intelligent than humans, thing one. And thing two, any intervention you make as a human cannot for a moment understand the intelligence of the system where you are making the intervention. So you think you're doing right, you have no idea what the consequences of what you're doing are. We realized none of the relocations are doing anything to improve our safari experience.
It's probably something like just walking out into the middle of a dry patch of earth and trying to put tomatoes there. You're missing out on the fact that the way that you create a garden is you have to create the right condition. And you have to create an environment in which the right things can flourish. They were on the right track. They knew that they had to bring wildness back to the park. They had to get this area back, but they weren't yet enlightened as to how to start in the right place. They began their search, and their search took them all over into the national parks, where they were met with steep opposition.
Kruger National Park was where the scientists resided, the experts. We went to talk to them. What's the problem? Why is our bush encroaching? How do we deal with this?
And every scientist that they spoke with gave a very narrow view as to what had to be done.
Often we'd say, is there anyone else? And occasionally someone would say, yeah, there's this guy Tinley, he's crazy.
Ken, from what I can understand, was a maverick himself. He lived for at least a year in solitude in the big reserve in Mozambique called Gorongosa. And I think during that time he experienced what people experience when they go live alone in nature, this incredible sense of connection to something that is alive and intelligent. And he started to perceive the interconnectedness of wilderness.
That was his great strength. He could observe nature. So we got hold of him and we said, listen, we're from Londolozi, we got some problems. Yeah, we don't know what the problem is. Will you come and help us? He said, I will come. First thing, go and get your 1944 and 1974 aerial maps. When you've got the maps, call me. So that's what we did. And then he arrived. Okay, Ken, I'll take you out now. He said, no. He said, where are the aerial maps? When he got the aerial maps, he said, okay. So and now what? He said, I'll call you. Okay. Now, no one had said that to us before. We'd had other people from different places given us a lot of theory on how burning opens the bush and all sorts of stuff. He said, bring me your aerial maps.
And I always say Ken was the homeopath of the environment. He saw everything holistically.
He actually took them to the grassroots level of how do you restore, block by block, piece by piece, an ecosystem.
What you have to do is you have to understand topography, and you have to understand how moisture moves through a wild system. And that's what Ken was a master of. And then you look at the lay of the land and you go to the lowest point, and what you'll find there, if you're getting woodland encroachment, is you'll find an erosive furrow.
And this is where he brought us, to this spot over here. Now, at that time, you can imagine thorn trees and a bare, eroded ravine. Bare, no grass.
Where all of that moisture that's falling, instead of being absorbed into the earth, it's running off into this furrow and it's running away. And then it becomes a perpetual cycle. You lose more moisture, it sends up more woodland.
We said, so now what? He said, take all these thorn trees that you see invaded on this area, all around here. Take them, lift them out of the ground, and stack it in the drainage line, crown upwards. You start to allow the water to percolate through this drainage line when the next rains come. That was nature's way of stabilizing itself. And that's what we did. It was like someone had switched the lights on, because now we understood. It wasn't one seed plant, they repeat themselves. And wherever you look at this encroachment, look at that encroachment, look at this thing. Well, we gotta fix that, we gotta fix it. Yes, and we went to work, hey? We worked like Trojans.
What you have to do is you have to commit to a kind of courageous act of healing. For a while it looks terrible as you smash around with your bulldozer, bust it up and you think, sure, this is terrible. And then a year later you go back there and there's a grassland and there's waterbuck starting to come back and there's wildebeest starting to come back.
Honestly, the mutual respect, the abundance that comes and is given from the land, if you are tuned in, it's just unbelievable.
Nature's ability to restore, especially when you've worked with her, that was the key to the door.
One day when you're out there cutting scrub and restoring the micro-catchment in a clearing, you actually can't imagine the effects that your work that day will have over the next 20 years into the entire eco-tourism industry and restoration movement in Southern Africa. It's actually remarkable.
There seems to be a relationship between, as we started to repair the land, and our relationship with leopards. We speak of this one relationship with the mother leopard and how she became tolerant of our activity.
Some people may say it's coincidence or a gift, but this leopard arrived just at that nick point where the land was returning. The seeps had been restored, there were clearings that were coming back, and game was returning as well. Slowly, she would let them get closer and closer.
She was the mother of a number of litter of cubs that all grew up trusting the relationship that was being built here with people. Word started to get out that there was a place in South Africa where you could go and have an encounter with this most mystical and elusive of big cats. Her presence here started to create this magnetism, and that gave this place a tremendous amount of momentum.
As I talk to you today, it's the highest density of leopard in the world, and it's the definitive recordal of wild leopards in the world.
A lot of people beat humans up for destroying the planet, but we are a unique species in that we can also create harmony the other way.
If we are going to do better as a species in terms of our relationship with planet Earth, first thing, we have to become conscious of our ignorance. The land fits together how it was fit together thousands and thousands of years ago, and will still be like that thousands of years to come. Unless you understand that and start to consciously work with the master plan, you're doomed to be at war with nature, and she will win. Every single little tiny thing in nature is pure genius. Its design, how it got there, how it builds, how it exists, how it breeds, how it survived. Pick anything. It's genius. We need to be respectful of that before we mess with it.